Welcome back to Forest Hill United Methodist Church's podcast, It Takes a Village. I am Reverend Justin Snyder, and today we are talking with Skyler Shigoda, who is a member of Forest Hill, who is also a part of the Western North Carolina Conference staff, and is also someone who is going through the candidacy process in our conference. So it's really good to be with you today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to our conversations. Before we click record, we talked for a really long time, and I said, I wish I had turned it on already. So for those of you who are listening, I thought it would be great if, Skyler, if you could tell us just a little bit more about you, how you got here, where you come from, all of those things.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm originally from Illinois. Both my husband and I, Noah, grew up in a small town in Illinois called Charleston. And so I grew up in a Methodist church there. Loved it and developed a call to ministry within that church because of the support of my home congregation and just their embodiment of living into what we're called to be as a church. So I went to school for undergrad in Chicago for 4 years. And then after I graduated, Noah and I got married, lived near home for a year until I went to Vanderbilt Divinity School in 2019. So I started at Vanderbilt Divinity School in the fall of 2019. So by the spring semester, COVID hit, and that was a very different experience of divinity school than I ever thought possible. So when I was done there, my husband received a promotion to come to Charlotte for work. And so I followed him. I ended up here in Charlotte, and I worked at First United Methodist Church in Charlotte as their director of children, youth, and families for 2.5 years until I was offered to be the Cultivate Grant Coordinator here in the Western North Carolina Conference. So my job at the conference office is to just be in charge of the Cultivate Grant, which is all about nurturing children in worship and prayer in local congregations. So I work with all of our congregations in Western North Carolina who want to think through ways to connect better with children in our worship spaces and how to connect them more with prayer so that they are connected for the long term of their life.
Yeah. So in North Carolina, everyone goes to Duke or they go to Hood. So at Forest Hill, we have lots of people who are Hood, and then we have people in our community who are Duke. But we don't hear about many people who go to Vanderbilt. So tell me a little bit about Vanderbilt. So it's in Nashville.
It is. So in Illinois Great Rivers Conference is where I come from, and everyone there goes to Garrett in Chicago. And being the person who was like, I don't want to be like everyone else, I looked at Duke and I looked at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was closer to home and offered me more money. Yeah. So I went to Vanderbilt. It's very inclusive, not strictly Methodist. So in my cohort, or like in my year of students that I studied with, there were probably like 40 of us, and there were 4 Methodists. So a very different experience from what Duke students go through with a large cohort of Methodists.
Yeah, I had a friend when we finished undergrad who went to Vanderbilt. I think the thing that most Forest Hill people might, in an adjacent kind of way, understand about Vanderbilt is we do a lot of book studies by someone who was a professor at Vanderbilt forever. So we did a lot of Amy Jill Levine.
And she was my professor of New Testament.
That's pretty nice.
It is. I had Amy Jill Levine as my professor as COVID hit. So it was just a wonderful experience to learn from her and love her.
Yeah. Amy Jill is Jewish and has a passion for helping Christians understand what it is that they're actually reading and where it comes from and contextualizing it. And I had the opportunity to hear her Zoom in. So while it was unfortunate for you, I got to have Amy Jill as a guest lecturer one time. So it sounds like you had a really wonderful experience in seminary.
Yeah, I loved it. I walked away knowing that more of my call was around discipling young disciples, whether that be college students, children, youth. I walked away knowing that I want to be within the youngest population of the church to see how that changes the way we go forward as a church. Being somebody who was at General Conference 2019, I realized how important the voice of the young people are. And so that definitely was empowered when I was in divinity school.
Yeah. So I heard you say that your home congregation when you were younger was really formative.
It was.
Of leading you and guiding you in your call and kind of shaping that. And I hear you talk a lot about young people. And you're doing this really exciting thing, I think, in our conference with this Cultivate grant. So can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has looked like, or maybe some of the really awesome things that you've seen about that?
So my experience as a young kid and youth in church who was supported and encouraged to find my calling and chase it. That's something that I want to empower young people with today as well, create that community of support for people who need it. And so a lot of what I do is like supporting children's ministers in our conference so that they can support their congregations. Right now we're in the kickoff stages of the grant still. This first year is all about listening to what churches need so that in the next couple of years I can make sure I resource them and give them all the resources that they need for the continuation of nurturing children through worship and prayer. But some of the really cool things that I've seen are like our rural churches really integrating intergenerational worship, and like a 70-year-old sitting with a 1-year-old and giving the mom a break during worship. Some of our rural congregations who you think would like never want to make a change are putting in what we call playgrounds or like worship spaces in the back of the church. And like an older grandma sitting back there with them, like walking them through worship. And that's such a cool experience to know that like there's a space that's comfortable and welcoming to them in that church setting that can sometimes feel like strict and rigid. So it's making those changes that are comfortable. We know that like wooden pews aren't always comfortable for adults. So like it's definitely not going to be that comfortable for a kid. So just seeing the small changes that churches are already doing. And I can't wait to see what happens in 5 years for the other congregations to join in.
I think one of the really interesting things that's happened here at Forest Hill in the last couple of years is we had this one Sunday school class. So this is a shout out to the McEachern Quick class, who was of one generation predominantly. And by nature of some happy accidents and kind of new relationships, their entire Sunday school class has become multi-generational, like from someone who is over 100 years old to someone they joked the other day and said their youngest member is 4 months old.
Yeah.
And so to see the life that infuses in, not just for one specific age, but for everybody, is really a transformational thing.
Yeah.
They put together a baby shower, and they said like it's the first one they've done in a long time, and they were just so really excited to make these connections with people who are at different stages or just different places in life than them.
Exactly. And it's really all wonderful. About creating that culture of community, of support, of prayer, of spiritual community where we're supporting each other spiritually, feeding each other, but also like physically feeding each other when we need to, and being that support system for each other.
So some of the things you've seen and some of the places you've been, I'm sure you've seen some really great things and maybe some that weren't as great. But what are some of the things that you think are helpful for churches now to really embrace that like fullness? I know you talked about like these spaces at the back of the sanctuary. What are some other things that you've seen that are just really wonderful opportunities for that?
I think it's helping us have the conversation of church doesn't have to be one way. For other people, church, we get a picture in our head of what church looks like when we hear the word. And yet for some people, that's not a place that is welcoming or inviting or able for them to walk into. And so when we think about shifting this idea of church just to be a community of belonging where all are welcome and seen and loved and known as a child of God. Like that creates a new community of people, of support, of inclusion, where real discipleship and wrestling and beautiful conversations come about.
I really love that. So we're exploring this Gibson Village worshiping community.
Yes.
And that's really at the core of it. Like, we understand that if someone was going to come to worship and they wanted 9:00 contemporary, they'd already be there. Exactly. So that idea of like releasing some of the things that we hold as our expectations for what worship should be, and then really allowing the people in the space to
create it, to let it be what they need in that space, and go from there. Sometimes I had a supervisor once say, like, it's just throwing spaghetti at the wall. You don't know like how long it's gonna stick or when it's going to fall, but like let it be there in the moment, holding it while you're creating this thing together.
Yeah. So Skyler is part of our book study that we're currently doing, called The Art of Gathering. And I'm going to throw her under bus a little bit. She's in part in it because the conference, some of her staff are also reading the book. So it's a great way to double up on this.
Double up.
And so we've been talking about what it means to gather and why we gather, and like some of those things you're talking about, like how do we honor the people who are there, the things that they bring with them, making it so that it's meaningful for others and not just what we want to be meaningful for us.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that as you've kind of gone through this book or our conversations, that you think like, yes, that is what children or young adult or just the church in general is all about or needs?
I think the first thing that stood out to me in The Art of Gathering is really defining your purpose. And sometimes that feels like easy, like the purpose is just to gather. But the author really challenges us to think differently about like, keep digging, keep asking why. Like, why do you want to gather? Well, why do you want to gather in a new space? And so you keep digging until you get to your core reason. And so often I think we just stop when we think about why we gather for worship. It's just because what we do, instead of thinking about the real reasons of why we worship and why we come. It's a conversation that I've been having around children's ministry. If a child walks into worship who's typically gone to like a children's church moment, and they walk back into the sanctuary, sometimes they have no idea why we're saying a creed or singing the way we do, or they don't understand what offering is. And so what changes in communication are we making so that kids understand why we do what we do? And that gets to the purpose part. But I think a lot of this book is also challenging me to think about the space, how welcoming spaces are, and what is needed for everyone to feel like they are a part of the group, whether that's comfortable chairs or a different scenery, or I know some people would rather have something in their hand than nothing at all, so that it's like a comfort piece to hold. So thinking about like, what do we offer to others to make them feel comfortable in a space?
That idea of digging deeper, like, and I think she said, and when you think you've found it,
keep digging, keep going.
And I think that's a really wonderful thing for like us to do as a church, us to do as a denomination, just as individuals. Like when we meet with our family, like, why are we doing these things? It's not just like it's Thanksgiving, so we eat a turkey.
But if we don't like turkey, why are we still eating turkey?
One of the things that the book said is like, we do things and at some point they held a value and then they just become a ritual.
Yes.
And we sometimes lose the connection for why we do it, which doesn't mean that it's not this like sacred thing for us, but sometimes it's hard to for us to know why. And so I think that's really important. Like when we're gathering in Sunday school, why is it important that we grab people from the hallway who are not in a class and like try to love on them? And like, what does that really mean? And what does it really mean to say, that we're going to do this study, or we want to have, a spot for children in the back. Because it's not just like you were saying, like, it's not just that the children have a space in worship. but it's that they get to experience like the fullness of worship in a place that's easy for them, that they can connect with, that they can start to understand some of the motions of worship and still be connected with those other generations.
Because they experience, even if you think they're just doing something else, they're experiencing it in a way that feels special to them. Most often you'll hear children say like, oh, I can't wait to like go to church. Like, and more often than not, parents are sometimes like, oh, my kid hates going, but they like, there is an experience there for each one of them. And also it's that experience of the congregation talking to the kids, like asking their name is like one of the most important values. Like sometimes we think we can't talk to the kids. Ask them their name. That is so important. Just like if somebody came up to you and asked you your name, like that feels like you're seen and valued. And so it's important for kids to hear that too.
There are some members of the youth here, and they're in worship, and they were at a camp or something, and like somehow communion came up, and they started quoting Mandy's like, this isn't Forest Hill's table. No. And like they Scott's never table. Said that. But they were listening.
Exactly.
Like, there are these points where we think that people, just because they're quiet or we're not talking to them, that they're not a part of it, but they're very deeply a part of it, and they're connecting to things.
They take it and inwardly learn. Most often a kid learns the Lord's Prayer because they hear it every week. Not because they're saying it, but because it's repeated every week to them.
So I've been at Forest Hill 11 years. Sounds really wild to say that's been 11 years. People, I've said this before, they said I was 15, so now I'm 25. That's also sadly not true. But you joined just back in February. So you have really fresh eyes. You have a perspective that is so different from mine, because everything just looks normal to me. We say once you're here long enough, like everything just appears normal, but to you, that's a whole different view. So what are the opportunities that you see in this place for us to do that deep connection, relational community building? Or what are some ways that you see that we can do more of?
I think for me, I came in, and I might be different than the normal person who comes in off the street, but I immediately wanted to come in and feel belonging, and like I'm also giving a part of myself to the community that I'm living and journeying this faith journey with. And so one of the first things that like was really important to me at Forest Hill was like getting plugged in, like having a conversation with you and Mandy, and just figuring out where I fit in and like what I could do. And that looks very different from what my husband wants to do and like the way he plugs in, and we're separate on our own, but yet we like get to worship together. And the best thing is that we were never pressured to do any of that. I've walked into other churches where my first day there, they asked me to join a team. And you're like, whoa. This is not like, Noah and I came here about 3 or 4 times before we were like, okay, like this feels like a community that we can be a part of. And there was no pressure, but there was already a sense of belonging and encouragement. And so I think we continue doing that, being open to, if you see somebody new walk into your sanctuary, make sure they're greeted. Like studies often show that like a new person needs to be greeted 3 times before they walk out the door for them to feel comfortable. And that's an old study. So it may be even more now, but I think keep welcoming, keep smiling, keep journeying with people as they start to feel comfortable in a space. I think a lot of what we can do is like ask the genuine questions. Like I think about John Wesley's like class model of like, are we not just asking like, oh, how's your day? Oh, it's good. But like, are we really living into the community?
How is it with your soul?
Those are hard. Maybe don't ask that to somebody who just walks in the door. But if you know someone and like are developing that relationship with them, asking those like hard questions and wanting to know the truth, that's important. Like to get to developing those friendships and relationships, that's how we build deeper meaningful community within the church.
Yeah. If you're going to ask someone how they're doing, be prepared for them to say, not too
good.
Yeah.
And be okay with sitting in that moment with them.
Yeah.
It can be uncomfortable, but that leads to a moment of honesty and integrity and like continually checking in on them.
Yeah. And they're opening up a space with you.
Yeah.
Like, that's really something really special and intimate.
Yes.
And it's a holy space.
Yeah.
That you're entering into, that someone has said, I see you.
Yeah.
And I want you to see more of me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know as a millennial, it's really hard to find community. And one of the easiest places to do that is at church, but it's scary and it's hard. And so.
And like, what should I look like? How should I be? I can't show these other parts of myself because it is church. And, yeah.
It's all of that into one. And so when we open up these levels of like shutting down the fear and just living into a space of authenticity, that creates like really beautiful community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. So to wrap it up, because I think, like I said at the beginning, we could talk forever. We're talking a lot about Gibson. Yeah. We're talking about like the gifts and the graces that we each have, and the ways that we as a church can learn from other people and the things that they do, that can be used to do good in the world, that can be used to expand community beyond just who we naturally interact with.
Yeah.
And we really hope that we do that well by listening, kind of like what you're saying with your position. And so thinking about like Gibson Village, thinking about kind of what you're doing. And you kind of said this earlier, but like in a couple years for Forest Hill, what do you hope still holds true that you see in this day?
I mean, I hope that anyone walking through the door feels welcome, that they're greeted just like we were when we walked into the doors. I hope that the feeling of belonging is a sense that everyone feels when they but like even when they're just here visiting. I want them to feel that this is a place where they can feel God's love through the people that God loves. And so at Gibson, I think a lot about like, it's not going to look like anything else that we know here. And we have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, that it's not going to feel like something we know, but that we're okay with the unknown, that we're going with the flow and creating this space for what people actually need.
Yeah. Somebody, when they first got here, it was their first week visiting, and they got visited by a whole bunch of people. They came afterwards and they said, it was really confusing because I felt like I was at homecoming, but this wasn't my church. I'd never been here before. But I think that level of like that radical welcome is just so important.
It is.
And it's okay if you don't remember somebody's name the next time, but just to say like, I see you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you are here, and I get to experience this time with you.
Yeah.
It's really important.
It's as easy as like, hey, I may have seen you last week and I don't remember your name. Remind me again. Like that helps them know that they were seen and they were heard. But like, just keep making those connections. Keep making people feel welcome.
Yeah. Skyler, thank you so much for having this conversation.
No problem.
And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.